What's going on, y'all? I'm David with RV Family.Life. We've lived in our RV for over 2.5 years, and today is one of those days that you don't want to talk about in the RV life, and that's when you start having some kind of mechanical failure. In this case, it's the Ram. It's been making a lot of racket and noise for the last 3 or so weeks, and I believe I have troubleshot it down to the wheel bearings in the front, which you can see over my shoulder right here, the front wheel, driver's side. Like I said, it's getting pretty noisy. Noisy enough as I'm driving down the road over 20 miles an hour and pedestrians are looking at like, what's that noise? What's that racket? A wheel bearing is nothing to mess with because that's the kind of thing where if the wheel bearing seizes and locks up, it can catch the wheel on fire, lock it up completely, and then essentially the wheel just comes right off, leaving you without a critical point as you're driving down the road with, you know, your RV hitched up, your family inside, all the important things. So it's a pretty big deal. To add on top of that, to add some spice to this recipe, we're only here for a couple of days. Finding the part was hard to do. Getting into a shop would be a week to 2 weeks just to get anybody to look at it. Thankfully, I'm somewhat mechanically inclined, raised by a family of mechanics that knows how to do stuff, and I have friends with a lot of mechanics. Thank you, Sean, for all the chats we've had recently about this. It is also extra tough when you only have one vehicle. That's a big one. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos on how to replace the wheel bearing hub assembly and to make sure that I have all the right wrenches, sockets, hammers, everything. Because once I take everything apart, that means either I'm going to have to beg somebody else for a ride or I'm going to have to put it all back together. I'm sure you might think, well, what about Uber? Well, a lot of times when we're at these RV parks, we're out in the middle of nowhere. Ubers don't really exist out here. It could, depend on where you are, it could work. I want to give a huge shout out to O'Reilly Auto Parts. I ordered this part about 8 or 9 o'clock last night. And by 1 o'clock today, brand new wheel bearing hub assembly already in my possession. That was a really fast turnaround. Nobody else could do that fast. So we are currently at Long Beach in Washington, and there's Napa and Ace Hardware. So I wanted to get an upgrade half inch drive impact wrench for jobs like this. So finally got that. And then multiple different things here. We got pry bar set, because it could be a lot of work to separate the brake rotor from the hub assembly. Nice solid hammer for smacking things loose. Penetrating blaster to try to loosen up those rusted and tight screws. And then anti-seize lubricant. So when you're putting the screws back together, you've got this stuff so that you can, hopefully next time it won't be so bad. This is a 2020 Ram 3500 dually, and I should need a 33 millimeter socket. That is for the nut that is directly on the axle. 21 millimeter socket. The dualies have this extra piece that spreads out the front wheels, kind of pushes them out further, and there are some extra nuts that go to that. We'll take a look at that. 18 millimeter for the back of the hub assembly, for where this hub assembly bolts onto the back of everything. So many things bolted to so many things. And I believe I needed a 16 millimeter box wrench in relation to the brake rotors. Those are all items I did not have yet. I've got a decent amount of tools. Let's take a look. I've got the mallet. Been using that a lot, but I felt I needed a heavier duty hammer. A 15/16 socket to actually take the brake off. That should get it to slide off of there. In order to get the, what is it called? That adds on to separate the wheels. Yeah, well, look at that. I had this already. And then to flat out remove the wheels on these big trucks, it is a 7/8 socket. So let's get to work. All right, first things first, check up the truck. And one of the tricks we're gonna do, we want to lift up the entire front end. That will make it easier on some of the tricks that I had learned from watching YouTube videos. It's a bit of a tight squeeze laying under there to jack it up. I like to get the jack directly under the axle, so it causes me with my bottle jack to go a little further back. I am using a 12-ton bottle jack for this job, and then I've got several 6-ton, I believe they are, jack stands that I'll put under just to keep everything firm and secure once we get it up. First, I jacked it a little bit, but you still want to have some solid ground for loosening up these lug nuts. Some of you may be like, Dadoy, I've been taking tires off my whole life. But you know what? Some of you may have not. So we're going to start with these, the 7/8. Going to break these loose and then jack it up the rest. I just picked up this 1/2-inch drive impact wrench. This is going to help me out with jobs like this because there's a lot to do, a lot to loosen. This thing is awesome. One thing I just thought about too, loosen those, but when you take your hubcap off on these rams, you can see the nut right in here and validate that the 33mm that I bought is indeed a perfect fit. I think I'm gonna have to forego jacking to both sides. I really struggle with finding where to put my jack stands under here, under the axle, because this bar right here, that's gonna move when I turn the wheel. So I may just have to forego the trick of turning the wheel. So let's look right here. This is the spacer. Is that the right word? These should be the 21mm nuts. In fact, it's time to go get my socket and check that. So this has to come off. Take those off first. You do that by sticking your extender right through there. And then you can use your impact wrench right through there to take that off. And then that all comes off pretty simple. There's nothing overly fancy going on with this piece right here. It's just pushing the wheel out. Then off comes the brake from the rotor, this right here. That's where the 15/16 socket on the back will come in play. And we don't want to ruin the brake line. So I've stacked up a bunch of wood over here, which I will use to try to hold the brake off to the side without ruining anything. That's our next steps. All right, here's the 21mm socket. Take that, put that on the nut, impact wrench with an extension, stick it through there, get it lined up, push it in, take it out. Just like that. Now repeat that about 8 times. Okay, took all of those off, and what I did, so I wouldn't lose them, they're the same threads. I didn't thread them all the way on, but I just put them out here on the end, just so that I could try to keep them clean. There's a lot of dust and dirt on the ground. So just kind of keep them clean while I'm working on the rest of the stuff. I picked this up from one of the YouTube videos I watched. Just to let y'all know, I have a playlist. I think it's marked to private. I will try to make it public. It's just called Ram Maintenance. And it's literally a collection of all the videos that I watch in preparation for doing big jobs like this. So fact check my work, double check my work, run it by everybody else so that, you know, I don't ever say watch one video and know how to do everything. I always overanalyze the situation. One of the videos I absolutely loved, the guy completely missed the size of one of the nuts on the back, so I had to find it from somewhere else to make sure I had the right one. He had everything else, he just missed that one detail, so I may miss a detail too. Anyway, yep, I learned this from one of the videos. You can check out the playlist and see if you can figure out which video that came from. All right, let's take this thing off here. Huh. Okay. Well, I didn't think this part would be that hard. Time to bring out the big guns. There's a reason I bought like crowbars and pry bars and hammers. All right, so I kind of gave up on getting these separated. Not sure how badly I need to get those two separated. We'll find that out in a minute, but I wanted to update you real quick on the brake. The 15/16 bolts. The one on the bottom came off easily with just the socket and the torque. The bottom one came off easily with just the impact wrench and the 15/16 socket. The top one though, you've got the brake line and the ABS sensor line in the way. And I was actually able to break it loose. I applied some PB Blaster, then came back at it at an angle with this right here attached to the impact wrench, and it did finally break loose. Pretty heavy duty bolts. You don't need, if you're not changing out the brakes, you don't need to undo all that. Everything should stay the same. With the same rotors, everything's going back on. You can just remove these two 15/16s, pull this aside, and as you can see, I made a nice stand there to hold it all out of the way so that it doesn't wind up ripping my brake line. Do something so that it doesn't fall. It did, when I took that bottom bolt out, it was suddenly like, whoa, I'm falling. Like, oh crud. Instantly kind of changed gears in my head to hold it and keep it from going any further. Let's see if you can hear what I'm hearing when I spin this. So when you do that, when you turn this, it should be quiet. So now I'm trying to decide if I could just take this off and leave this spacer on here and get the whole thing off, or should I keep trying to break this free? Because it's like they're one. I'm like having no luck separating these two, so I went ahead and took the 33 millimeter hub nut off of there. I'm gonna see if I can just start working this whole thing off as one piece. All right, y'all, turn the camera off for a little bit. I was getting a little frustrated. Finally got that part off. Sprayed PB Blaster all around the sides as well as on all the threads, and just kept spinning it and hammering it, spinning it and hammering it. Now that I got all that done, the rotor actually feels pretty loose too, so that's actually a good thing if I can get the rotor off now. Kind of jarring both of those with that hammer just over and over again. My hand is sore. There's a reason that diesel mechanics look buff, right? All right, that was easy. When you're working around this part, you want to make sure you don't hammer or damage any of this part on either side. Probably need to apply some brake cleaner too, since I got that PB Blaster on it, because we don't want to have any slippage there. On to the next part. All right, so this is the hub assembly. From here, all of this right here. This is the axle that goes back into the U-joint. So what I need to do now, there's a special tool I saw, which I can't get access to. So the guy at Napa was like, put this back on here and hammer on this so as to not damage it. Because what you want to do, there's like a bunch of teeth inside of here, both sides, and it's how they meet together. And when you pull on this, you do not want to pull the U-joint out, or you're going to be doing more work back inside the axle. So we need to kind of break this loose by pushing it back while pulling this forward. Good times. Also an option, removing this 10 millimeter bolts right here and removing that shield. I'm not sure how necessary that is. I'll let you know if I do that. All right, one of the things to talk about or to consider or to think about is this wire right here where you can see the hex screw holding it in. That is the ABS sensor. Now the new one comes with a whole new wire that goes all the way up in there and connects over there. And when I was reading through the forums, I found where some people bought some non-OEM parts, which is what I've got. It's all I could get. They lost a lot of features like cruise control and other things because the ABS sensors were not the same spec, I believe is what it said. So my thought process is, I think I will go ahead and just try to preserve this sensor, take the new one off, and just keep this one here and unscrew it from here and put it right into the new hub when I put it on, in hopes that everything will work properly, because I've not had any errors whatsoever from the ABS system. A lot of people, when their hubs go bad, they get these consistent ABS errors. I've not had those yet, so I think I'll try to preserve that sensor in hopes that that I don't have to take all this apart, since don't have a whole lot of time trying to get this done as fast as possible. So here's the new hub assembly, and there is the new ABS sensor right there. I can take that off nice and easy. I'm going to take, that was a 3/16 that worked on there, so I'll go see if that works on the old one. I just put some PB Blaster on the 18 millimeter bolts because they're not budging at all. Now letting those soak in, so I figured I'd work on the ABS real quick. Got me, I put a little PB Blaster on it ahead of time. Got me a larger 3/16 and was able to break that free. So I'm going to try to, like I said, preserve that sensor. Nothing's been wrong with it. It doesn't seem great. And it's got a little O-ring at the top. It's got that gel that's on there. So we'll try to save that. I'm going to keep it clean. It's pretty much guaranteed to get dirty. I'll go get a Ziploc bag. All right, 18 millimeter bolts came off. I found it better to use my 1/2-inch drive torque wrench as opposed to the powered impact wrench. That was just making everything hot in a bad way, and it wasn't actually breaking them loose. So once I switched to using this, they actually broke loose pretty easily. But I did have to turn the wheel. Did so very cautiously as I'm jacked up and still one tire is touching the ground. Yeah, that was dangerous. So at any rate, 18 millimeter bolts are off. Now it's time to push back on the hub, push back on the axle inward, and pull outward on the hub assembly. Let's do it. Put a snack bag around that sensor, just try to keep it as clean as I possibly can. All the bolts are out from here. So now this has to come out, and that middle part right there has to stay in and go back. So it's going to be a matter of probably hammering out, hammering in, hammering out, hammering in. And I'm hammering on the nut instead of the actual, I don't want to damage any of the threads. So by hammering on the nut, it should be better. And using the plastic hammer, the guy at Napa's like, you shouldn't damage anything with that. It's hammer time. Okay, now I can see why taking that shield off may be a good thing. I think we should take the shield off. All right, I thought it'd be clever. Just spin this thing around, hammer on this side, not take the shield off. But then I was noticing I'm breaking loose on this side, not really breaking loose on that side. So, yep, 10 millimeters, take the shield off, hammer all the way around. This is the way. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Easy to access those ones, take that off, no problem. I think the U-joint's coming out too far. Well, there's the hub assembly. I got it off. There's everything else. And I think what bothers me the most is how easy it was for the U-joints and the axle basically to come out with it. I mean, it's just super easy for it to come out over here, whereas it's super difficult to let go where these teeth are, with the teeth in there. That just kind of bothered me. I mean, I'm talking super easy. So then as I take it apart and I'm listening for noises, I'm not really getting any noises off this. It seems like the noises are actually coming out of the front differential. Terrific. This is difficult decisions here, all taken apart. I mean, I might as well put the new bearing on, right? So the new hub assembly slid on like super easy. Thought I was going to have time to come over here and set the camera up to watch me try to fuss with it and fidget with it, and it actually just slid right on there. Almost too easy. So many scary things. All right, I'm going to change out this ABS sensor wire with the old one, and then go from there, putting stuff back together, and also using this anti-seize lubricant on all my screws and bolts, so that way, hopefully, they'll be easier to take off the next time. All right, I went ahead and put the old ABS sensor into the new one. I used the new bolt, and as well as a new gasket, little metal gasket they had right there. And now I put the anti-seize lubricant, that stuff right there, it's kind of silver looking, on the 18 millimeter bolts, and I am kind of tightening them down in a star-like pattern, just kind of bringing it all together, because what it's doing is bringing all of the axle back together, and so I'm trying to do it nice and evenly. So just kind of going around in a pattern, just kind of ratcheting them down. And then I did a lot of research to find my specific torque patterns or torque specifications. I believe these were 150, but they vary wildly. You really need to search for your own torque specs for your model. And they can be a little hard to find. Get on the forums and find out what you can find. And there's the new ABS sensor down there. Just kind of bag the end of it up just in case. Putting it all back together. So if I do wind up still having the loud noise I had, which was possibly coming from the differential, at least I can drive down the road knowing that I've got a good bearing here. Because the thought of driving down the road worrying that my bearing was bad, it's a scary, anxiety-inducing, not a good day. I'm gonna get this all put up together. I think it's about 7 o'clock in the evening. Hopefully I can get it all done, but if not, should be able to finish up tomorrow. All right, I got everything torqued back down, 149 on those 4 bolts. I would crank up the engine and turn the wheel left to the right, which then allowed me to be able to get my large torque wrench. So I do 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. Got them to 149, which is what I show. I need to put that shield back on with those 10 millimeter bolts. All right, the rotor is sitting on there. The brake rotor, typically not a whole lot holds it in place until you put other things on. That thing right there, extender, is gonna go on there. bolt it on, and that's what'll hold that on, as well as the brake. But I got a new problem. You have to push your foot on the brake pedal to start the truck. Well, it was pushing on those brake calipers, and now I've got to get them pushed back in. Yay, more work for me. It's the next day. We got daylight, and I'm back to it. I took some of the stuff back off because I forgot to get my hub nut or axle nut on there, and the torque on that is kind of crazy. Just wanted to show you guys a trick that I do real quick, or that I learned online. Put a crowbar here, kind of blocking these lugs from moving. Use my foot, because otherwise it tries to spin. And first, I got to go to 150 pounds. And then I'm going to turn the axle a few times, 5 to 10 times, and then I got to take it over 260. This is hard just to get it to 150. All right, there's 150. One. Interesting. I was twisting my torque wrench here. You kind of spin it to adjust your foot pounds. And it only has a marking up to 250. And then on the circle part, it goes to 0 through 9. And I kept going, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm at about 260. Like I said, it only goes to 250. I took it to what I thought was 263, which is what this is supposed to be at. Because a lot of people are like, good luck finding a torque wrench that goes over 250. So it took me all the way there, but then the little locking mechanism was kind of slipping at the high numbers. And it fell back to 259, and now it's locked. So it looks like I can go as high as 259 with this Craftsman torque wrench, 1/2-inch drive. This is going to be interesting. Stop the camera for a little bit. I'll just kind of show you the motion I wound up going with. I was really worried about the crowbar. I was in this motion right here. My legs are pretty strong, so figured add in my leg effort. And that's when I was finally able to get it to click. Whew. Time for some water. The axle nut's complete. Hub assembly bolts are complete. Brake rotor back on. So I went in and I added the anti-seize lockup spray. I added more of it in all the places where things were very tight and rusted together when I was removing this. Just trying to keep it off of the actual rotor. That's the key. Oh. Just double checking if I need to put that hub extender on there before putting the brake. And really the rotor just kind of flops around until you put that on there. So I would think yes. It'll be easier to take care of the brake as far as the brake pads go if the rotor is stabilized already. So I'm glad I didn't torque these down last night. Made it easier to, when I had second thoughts about what I was doing, just take them back off. So just hand tighten those down until you're really ready to torque those. Honestly, I probably could just leave a couple, not done yet. Because really right now my primary focus is getting the brakes back on. I had an issue where I'm starting the truck. In order to start the truck, I have to apply pressure to the brake. It was pushing my caliper all the way out. So now, whereas I was hoping that I could easily just slide the brakes back on, I cannot. They have adjusted. So I may have to further take my brake apart in order for it to fit on the rotor. I'll find out here very soon. I'm just doing half of these for now. Hand tight, just all I'm doing really, making sure the rotor doesn't move as I work on the brakes. That's it. Oh, and what holds the brake caliper on also has a crazy amount of pressure. It's over 200. So I will have to crank up the truck again once it's all on there and turn it so that I can get in there and put like 240 something pounds of pressure on those 2 bolts that hold the brake in place. Some people think that this is excessive, but this is also the kind of stuff that probably differentiates smaller trucks from these 1-ton trucks that have the ability to stop a lot of weight. They got bigger bolts with higher pressure capabilities because it all works together to support towing and stopping a much larger trailer. All right, I want to show y'all what I'm doing to get the brake caliper. It's got 2 of them. And I've got this here. I used to do brakes on my older cars, which were a lot smaller and typically only had 1 caliper. When I would push on 1 caliper, the other caliper would come out because it's not releasing the pressure back into the master cylinder. And first of all, just so you know, I used the 16 millimeter wrench, took it apart. I took the bracket apart, so that's the brake bracket there, just so I could deal with the caliper. So since I can't go anywhere to get anything else, what I did, I had this woodworking clamp, and so I've applied pressure here, keeping one side in while I keep applying pressure here. So I'll twist this one some more, and it tries to put more pressure up here, and I'll tighten that one a little bit more, and just keep working them in until these calipers get pushed back in so that I'll have enough space to go all the way around the rotor. Because otherwise what would happen when I step on the brake pedal, and if you're new to vehicle maintenance and whatnot, when you step on the brake pedal, it's basically pushing these 2 calipers out. It forces the brake fluid through this line and makes these calipers go out and squeeze this rotor, which then stops your vehicle from moving. Like I said, I've worked on cars for years. Typically my cars were smaller, Pontiac Grand Prix, Ford Contour, stuff like that. This is my first 1-ton truck. I think going forward I probably will buy a second one of these so that I could just easily work these 2 down. And who knows, maybe there's something out there that's actually specifically for the 2 caliper version. We shall see. Alright, let's see if I can film this calipers going back on here. Hopefully I don't pinch my fingers. There we go. This is the way. Alright, probably got it pushed in more than I needed, but it went back together. That's what I was looking for, just get it back together. Now it's going to be time to torque these down. These bolts that actually hold on the caliper here actually have a very light torque rating because this is basically moving. Every part of this is moving and adjusting as your brake pads wear out and you're stepping on the brakes. It's all a moving part. It's the big bolts back here. They're the 15/16. That's the socket that I had to use, 15/16. Those are the ones that need to be secure to hold it all in place. Those are the 240 foot-pounds, I think. Don't quote me on that. Do not. I have to look it up. I have it in my notes. So these ones here can pretty much hand tighten and then wrench tighten. It's really a light torque spec on these. So glad I got that in there. All right, I've got listed 275 as the torque pressure for the mounting brackets for the brake. I still can't go beyond 259 on this thing. I think I'll do one more pull on it though, just since that's as high as it can go. The bottom one, I've got the space here to pull up on it, but now I got to do the top one. Getting past the wheel well is kind of tough. Hopefully this all works out. I'm treating this like exercise. Each one of these pulls is kind of like doing a deadlift. I did 4 sets to get it to finally pop. All right, so I've got the extension on here. Now I'm gonna tighten these down to 130 foot-pounds, which by the way, if I didn't cover it already, the big bolts on the brake was 275. Good luck with that. But I noticed as I put this on here that it doesn't exactly center itself perfectly. You've got to kind of adjust it. It's got a little bit of play. I held it tight while I tightened down one of the bolts, and then after that it seemed to do fine. Let's go ahead and get this to 130. Yep, I'm gonna have to get the crowbar back out. Okay. Oopsie. $130. Now I gotta do that 7 more times. All right, y'all, I'm getting ready to put this wheel back on. Kind of cleaning up, getting stuff out of the way down here. Everything is tightened and torqued to spec. It's just a matter of putting the wheel and the lugs on and going and taking it out for a test drive. The wheel is back on. Lugs tightened down to 140. Per the specs in the manual. As you can see, so we've got the hubcap still off. And you can see that axle nut. Plain as day. So if you ever want to check that sort of thing, like check the size or anything, you just pop that off. And there's your nut without taking everything else off. It's a proper hubcap. Because that's the hub. Alright, I have been driving the truck slowly around the campground, anywhere from 2 to 7 miles an hour, just running some trash back. Figure that's a good first round of tests. Now it is time to go get it up to speed. I would typically start hearing the noise that was bothering me at about 15 miles per hour. It becomes more prominent at 19. I'd say loudest at 22 miles per hour. Well, darn it. It's still happening. Based on what I saw after I took everything apart, or what I heard really, I suspect the noise is coming from the front differential. While I was driving down the road testing it, I threw it into four-wheel drive high just to see if that changed anything. The noise didn't change, it stayed the same. It's like a tapping on a metal plate is kind of what the noise sounds like. It's the best I can think of. Happens most loudly between like 18 miles per hour and 30 miles per hour. I think it's still going on at higher speeds. It just becomes so fast and repetitive that you don't hear it so much anymore. I noticed it after we left La Conner, Washington, and I bring that up for this purpose. When I was backing the trailer in and I was slipping a lot, I put the truck into four-wheel drive so that I could get full traction as I backed the trailer in. Then when we left to go somewhere, I forgot to turn four-wheel drive off, and I was turning in the campground, and I'm like, oh, it's doing that four-wheel drive jerk when you turn. I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to have that on. So I turned it off in the middle of the turn, and there was a loud pop metal sound. And we were all like, what was that? Didn't think anything of it. It was a couple weeks later that I noticed this noise. Like, what is that noise? Now I went down the replacing the hub and the bearing, because there's various different types of noises that could come out of having a bearing failure. The danger of having a bearing lock up on you, especially while you're towing your RV down the highway, that was scary. Sounds like I probably didn't need to spend all the time and money that I just spent to replace the bearing. Yay me! I'm a little broker. Now it's going to be a question of just how detrimental is this noise if it's coming out of the front differential. If it's just noise, it'd be nice to get rid of it, but at the same time, it could wait. I got to looking though at all the bolts that go into that plate to cover it, and some of those, there's control arms and stuff that go in front of it, make it hard to get off. Not fun at all. Maybe you learned something from watching this video about how to do some things. Maybe you learned some things not to do. I hope you found some of this educational. Please just remember, this is a disclaimer. I am by no means an official carrier of information. I like to do this, just like I've said, watch multiple videos and maybe you can put together enough data before you make a decision. But don't go claiming that I'm a scientist that knows all the exact stuff, because I do not. Essentially, as far as everybody's concerned, this is for entertainment purposes. You probably watched just so you could laugh at me for making a fool of myself. All right, y'all. I'm gonna run into this grocery store and get some meat. Remember that life happens. Even expensive parts breaking on your truck. Don't let that stop you. Let it slow you down, because you don't want to get hurt, but don't let that stop you. Take care of it, get it fixed, and then get out there. Stay fresh, cheese bags.